Welcome to the MPFFU podcast. The intent and purpose of the MPFFU podcast is to support the mission to improve wages, working hours, and working conditions for its members. This podcast will disseminate evidence-based relevant information, resources, and strategies. To accomplish this, the MPFFU podcast will provide reliable, factual, and actionable information that strengthens, empowers, and supports the MPFFU members and locals through united action. Now our host, Jeff Lassers.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the MPFFU podcast. My name is Jeff Lassers and I have been a professional firefighter and a member of the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union since 2004. I also serve on the MPFFU's Union Education Committee. In this episode, we welcome back President Matt Sahr and Secretary Treasurer Terry Chesney. Matt and Terry are here to discuss the 2024 MPFFU Convention, which is set to take place from April 29th through May 1st, 2024 at the Park Place Hotel in Traverse City. Members interested in attending the convention should contact their local executive board for more details. Before our guests join us, here's a brief of the what, why, and how of MPFFU conventions. These biennial MPFFU conventions are more than just a gathering. They are where we come together to forge the future. By participating in these conventions, we have a direct hand in molding the Constitution and bylaws that govern our collective actions and principles. These are the documents that uphold our rights, define our duties, and reflect our values as a union. Before we explore the convention process, let's define a key term, a resolution. In the context of the convention, a resolution is a proposal for change or a new idea that members of our union suggest and then decide together whether to approve and put into action during our convention. Resolutions are how changes to the Constitution, bylaws, and the union's direction are proposed and voted upon. They are the building blocks of our union's policy-making process. Each convention follows a carefully structured process, ensuring order and efficiency. We commence with the submission of resolutions, which are carefully crafted proposals put forward by our locals. These resolutions are then debated, scrutinized, and voted on by the delegates. This is a process that embodies our commitment to democracy and collective decision-making as a fraternal organization. Our delegates are the voice of their respective locals at the convention. They hold the responsibility of casting votes that reflect the collective will and best interests of their fellow members. Each local is provided a specific number of delegates based on the size of their local. The more members a local has, the more delegates it can send to the convention. Delegates are chosen because they are trusted and know what matters most to the people they represent. An equally significant feature of our convention is the nomination and election of officers. These are the individuals who will be entrusted with the critical task of enacting the resolutions passed at the convention. The officers' roles are pivotal. They must embody integrity and commitment as they translate our collective decisions into actions. After resolutions are passed at the convention, the real work begins, turning those decisions into real-life outcomes. Our elected officers step up to make this happen, taking the blueprints we've agreed upon and building them into our union's everyday reality. These policies guide us for the next 2 years, ensuring that the union's direction is always aligned with what the majority of its members want. It's through this process that the true democratic spirit of our membership is reflected in the actions and future path of the union. The MPFFU conventions are the heart of our union's democratic process. From the presentation and adoption of resolutions to the election of officers, these conventions ensure that our union remains responsive, representative, and resilient. I encourage every member to engage with this process, understand it, and recognize the power of participation. Together, we shape the direction and future of our union. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Very well.
Good morning.
Well, let's get right after it. In the intro, we told everybody what the convention is, why, and all that. But Matt, what is the MPFFU convention to you? You've been to a bunch of them.
What I see from my perspective over the years is it's time to come and set that agenda for the next couple of years. Also a lot of camaraderie. seeing people you haven't seen in a long time, sharing our issues, and then giving direction to our executive board on what you would like to see out of your MPFFU over the next 2 years. But it is important to note that that's not the only time that we do that. It's constant communications, talking with your DVPs, talking to other local presidents to make sure that throughout the year we're building to our convention, and then we set that agenda and we go on for the next 2 years.
Yeah, it's almost like, hey, we just had 2 years. Let's talk about what worked, what didn't work, what can be done even better even if it did work, and let's do another 2 years. And that's just a check-in point to reboost, in my opinion, what I'm learning. So, Terry, you've been to more conventions than some guys got years on the job.
Well, for over 100 years, we've had conventions in Michigan. This will be the 55th biennial one. And this is living proof that the members are the union. This is where they have their voice, and they dictate everything that happens for the next 2 years or even farther into the future. Matt's not the union, I'm not the union. Our members are the union. And this is their opportunity to tell us what they want.
Yeah, this is like that convening time. It's literally in the name where we all get together and decide as a team. And unfortunately, we can't just decide every month. We can't all get together all the time. Right. It doesn't work like that. Our Constitution and bylaws says we work out the plan, we trust the process, and every couple of years we get together, we refine that process in the interest of every member.
That's a great explanation.
All right, so what are we doing this year? Matt, the first thing that happens is on that first day on April 29th, that's like that pre-conference day. It's not really day one. It's like day zero. Get there, and you got some work to do. It's not like we're all showing up there. I'm going to get there, probably go to my room, relax. You're going to be busy. What are you going to do?
So the first thing we do is we have an executive board meeting. So we like to meet before, talk about what the agenda is, what our roles and responsibility is as the officers of our union. So we'll do that. And then also we have our committees will start meeting. And two of the committees that will be meeting on that first day that I want to talk about are the Constitution and Bylaws and our Resolutions committees. The Constitution and Bylaws committees, they'll talk about the resolutions that affect our Constitution and Bylaws. And it's very important because that's our guide for how we're supposed to operate. So when we have something that's going to change the Constitution and Bylaws, it'll go to that committee. They'll review what our recommendations are from the executive board, and then they're going to give a report to the body. And then the body's going to debate it, and they'll vote it how they see fit. The Resolutions Committee is going to be appointed by me, and we like to try to go through and make sure that we're thoughtful on who we appoint. And it's really a team effort. I talk with our DVPs. I talk with Terry. Who can we get on these committees? And it's hard because we can't have everybody on a committee. I would love to be able to get somebody from every local on a committee, but the reality is when you only have such limited spots, we just have to follow the Constitution and Bylaws and make sure we try to get somebody from every district on there.
It's nice to have a big group of people. You're like, man, I wish I could have more because they're all so good, right?
I do. But to follow up on the Resolutions Committee, those have cost factors. So they're going to debate in their committee and look at the recommendation of the executive board on anything that has a cost. And then they're going to come back to the body, and then the body's going to debate it, and we'll have a vote, and we'll move forward from there.
And so basically, it's when you say resolution, as a reminder, we already talked about this in the intro, but when we say resolution, it's like, hey, I think we should resolve this idea. Here's an idea. I think we should change this to do X. Sometimes that costs money.
Correct.
And so that's really got to be considered because there's another fiduciary responsibility. You might have to buy stuff, and you're like, which one do I buy? So there's a lot to think here, which is, again, to speak back to the convening of all the people to get them together to understand these resolutions that got created over 2 years sometimes to make a big change.
And if we have resolutions from our members, somebody that's listening to this or watching it, we need to get them to Terry in short order, I believe by April 24th. Thank you. Especially if they have a cost factor, but all of them should be into Terry. The cost factor that's part of Terry's job, is he puts a cost factor on every resolution. So that's important because when we're looking at things, we have to make sure that our members know what the impact of our resolutions are. So I encourage all of our members out there, this is our time where you have an idea or something that you want to put to the floor.
If you do have an idea, but you have no idea on how to embed that into a process, who should you talk to? Like your local executive board, probably?
Your executive board first.
They'd probably appreciate that.
Yeah, because to get a resolution on the floor, you should probably be at the meeting, which means you need to be a delegate, maybe potentially an alternate as well if your local is going to maybe interchange with you, but it's going to go through your local executive board. And then when your local executive board has an idea, the best person to talk to in regards to writing it properly would be Terry, because if you ever read a resolution, it'll be like, whereas, those are kind of a pain in the butt. talk to the people that have been doing this for years and that know how to
kind of get it going. But you got to kind of start somewhere. So if you don't know, probably just talking to your local, start there, talk about the idea, see if it's got some legs, and then go from there.
We never try to jump the process and end up on Terry, because like on anything else, we end up at Terry or myself, then we're calling back to the president. The president's like, why are you talking to him?
Well, it's the least efficient way to get something done is to not follow the chain of command.
Right.
And that's the thing. It's just more efficient for everybody. But Terry, before we go on to those other committees like elections and credentialing that you're in charge of, when it comes to a resolution, it's more important probably to convey the idea than it is to worry about the language so much. Would that make sense?
Yeah, we tried to standardize all the resolutions so they all look the same. They're all in the same format.
Yeah.
That's what I do. But sometimes it intimidates people because they don't know how to do the whereases and that. Basically, your idea is the result, and the whereases are just a justification on why we should do this. I mean, you can't just say, hey, I want to have a new car.
Right.
You got to give all the reasons. And then the end is, so let's buy this new car.
Okay, so if I can give you objective, reasonable things to present, you will help me modify that in a way that fits into the structure and the rules of how they're consumed as resolutions.
And what I normally do would send that back and say, what do you think? Is this what you were looking for?
Yeah, work with them to make sure you're not losing translation. Sure.
Once again, it's about them.
Agreed. You're good secretary, so you're the guy who takes it in, tries to get everybody to understand and communicate. And then treasurer, well, if there's a cost assigned, well, let's look in the books and see what these things cost, and there's a process there. Okay, so that makes sense. You got the two committees there. They look at all the resolutions appointed by people that Matt put together out of a committee of humans that are going to be a part of this process. But there's other committees. Terry, let's talk about the elections committee.
So the committees that Matt talked about are the more glamorous ones.
Ooh, there's glamour with this thing?
They have the most, visibility. People see them. But the other conventions are very important because they do a lot of work behind the scenes that people just take for granted.
Sure.
Credentials means they're the ones that check in. They make sure that the delegates are properly registered. They make sure the local had paid their per capita so they can be eligible to be at the convention. And they help distribute the information to the people when they check in. So they do a lot of work. And they meet not only on the pre-day, then they meet the first day, and they meet the second day up until noon. So they're working a lot longer than Constitution, bylaws, and resolutions.
Yeah, they're basically logistics and operations.
Right. That's a good way to say it.
The other ones are making decisions, sure. But moving parts are just as important. And you're right, they're unsung heroes of that part. Glamorous in the point of they get to talk about some things that could steer the future. But you can't steer the future unless somebody's, keeping the pit crew together here.
And then another one's the Sergeant of Arms. And the Sergeant of Arms, there again, they work all those days. They're making sure that the right people are sitting in the right places and only the proper people are voting on the resolutions.
That makes sense.
And they help, once again, with a lot of other things. They're kind of like at our beck and call. When we need something, hey, do this, do that. And these people volunteer to do those. Matt appoints them, but ultimately they're people that want to help. And so they're very important as well.
We're grateful for all of those people.
Yes.
Thank you to all those people. Because it's not like they're swaying votes while they're there. No, they're just helping us carry on the mission for all these other members. And I think a lot of members, self included, go a long time in their career without realizing that these people that help them throughout their career by just helping their union. Yep. And you just don't get it. So it's nice to have this conversation to bring to light all the back end to make any of this work. All right, so your elections committee is basically going to handle the elections.
So the elections committee tells everybody what the rules are for nominating and then when the elections are going to take place. Sometimes there aren't any elections because everybody just gets nominated and there's only one candidate. But you never really know until that nomination process is finished because somebody could run for secretary treasurer that hasn't said anything and that they get nominated.
Yeah, don't assume.
So you don't really know until nomination process is completed.
And that process comes right out of the Constitution and bylaws.
Right. And then the election committee, if there are elections, make up the ballots. They tell people when they're going to vote, and they have a list of the registered delegates, and they make sure only the right people vote, and they get the right number of votes.
That's very important. It's an almost manageable task with the number of humans that'll be there. And the type of humans that'll be there. Okay, so the credentialing committee already talked about who should be there, who shouldn't be there, labeling the right people, delegates versus alternates, because we don't want to mess up the number of votes. Makes sense. And then that night on day 0, April 29th, all the attendees for day 1 and day 2, the next following 2 days, are going to show up that night. There's a reception at the hotel. Anything fun in store?
It's just basically a welcome reception.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, it's
Bunch of firemen standing around looking at each other.
That's the time
Networking.
they're working, they're networking, and it's a big deal because you learn a lot during going to classes, but you also learn a lot hearing people talk about the issues that are affecting them. Very rarely do you have a unique issue that hasn't been handled before. Over time, you learn to say, okay, I've heard that before. This is what I think is the best course of action. Someone says, I'd like to try it this way. And sometimes they're really successful in doing it something different. But a lot of times it comes back to, it didn't work out. And I've been on the end of that multiple times with Terry coming to me going, in a nice way saying, well, I told you so. If you just would have.
Right. It's the exact same way we learn and train in the fire department. That's why we tell so many stories in the oral tradition of the fire department, because you're telling them what to look for. Hey, if you see this, right?
Right.
And that's just how our brains work. Well, so we're feeding into like how we learn.
Back when, I think it was actually in Novi, I don't know what we had going on, whether it was a conference or whatever is going on here. There's a very small bar up front. So it was packed, and the guys were just hanging out, having drinks, and a few firefighters were talking. And one of them was talking to a labor attorney. The conversation's going and going. And then I happened to be talking to the other gentleman that had overheard this conversation between the labor attorney and another local president. So the conversation moved, and it was like, hey, I heard you talking about X. I just want to tell you that you're wrong because, X, Y, and Z. So it's like, there wasn't like a fight or an argument, but it was that.
Maybe lending some information to help them.
And sometimes, we have a good time. You don't have to drink alcohol, clearly. Sometimes it helps, though. Sometimes it doesn't.
So, I'm not much of a drinker, so I'll be there too, yucking it up, pretending like I'm drunk. But I'm probably not going to be drinking.
But it does help. So you have a couple drinks and you relax. The point is relaxing. Whether you're drinking coffee or Jameson, you're there to relax, have a good time, and make sure that you're learning from other people. And you're learning sound unionism advice. It's not always about the feel. I love it when members come to us and say, it's just common sense. This is what we should do. And I'm like, man, if that's how we operated on straight common sense, man, there would be
pretty boring.
Not just boring, but we'd have a lot of people on the streets.
Yeah, that's true.
Right now, so.
That's true. Okay, so day 1 is April 30th. When I mean day 1, it's the day 1 of the actual convention, not the pre-conference. The rules have set. You guys have already been there for a full 24 hours getting stuff ready. 0900, the opening ceremony kicks off. And then, Terry, we set the stage with the rules of order.
Yeah, so that just basically tells the delegates how we're going to handle the rest of the convention. You can't have 10 people speaking at once. You're allowed to speak so many times on each resolution. How Matt's going to count the votes. And everybody will get a chance to see those prior to the convention. And then at the convention, they actually vote to adopt them as they were written or make amendments to them.
So everybody agrees on the rules of how we're going to basically get through resolutions, elections, and the rest of the next 2 days. We all agree on it, and then we move on.
Yes.
Right on. All right, Matt. And then basically the day's dedicated until about 5 o'clock that day. Basically the working hours of that day are going to be dedicated to resolutions. So basically people present a resolution. There's a lot of debate or a little debate depending on the resolution. And we talk about it. What's that look like?
So the resolution as a committee will get up there and they'll state what the resolution is. Then they'll read it and then they'll give their recommendation on it. So they will say something to the effect of the resolutions committee makes the motion to adopt. And then it would go to the floor. And they can either vote yay to adopt it or nay to reject it, or they can make amendments to it. So that's how that will come out. And then the person that wrote the resolution generally will have first say at the mic, speak specifically to what the resolution was, why they wanted it, and maybe give
context
some more, a little more nuances to what it is there.
Do they answer questions at that point?
No, it's not a question and answer
you just
time.
give information.
That's what the committees are doing for the days prior.
So the details should already be teased out by that point, and then they just give us supporting information. People then make comment throughout it until, basically, like Robert's rules, we just get to the point where we vote yay or nay. Essentially.
Yeah, essentially,
and then resolution number 2.
Yep.
And we keep going until 5 o'clock.
And we mix them up. We don't go through them all right in order.
Yeah.
We
want people to be engaged, right? Yeah. So you don't want to set everybody up for boredom.
Yeah. So we'll go back and forth, but quite frankly, these resolutions are really important for our members to review prior to, and then our committees are going to work hard on them and bring them back to the floor.
Yeah. Okay. And then Terry, you get those resolutions out to everybody prior to. the delegates?
Well, they don't have to be into us until like 5 days before. With emails and stuff, it's pretty easy to, send it out.
Yeah, because I know it'd be way
electronically.
easier for me to kind of consume, think about, and then when I'm at the convention, ask more questions rather than try to learn it. It seems like it'd be easier, but not everybody's got that time either. But we're doing this a month ahead of time. Maybe people will be more inquisitive early on. And people being more informed only makes us stronger.
Yeah.
So we tell people the deadline for submitting them for a couple reasons. One, so they put some thought ahead of time into it. You can submit a resolution after that date, but it has to have the approval of the committee and or the membership that's at the convention. And the justification has to be it's something new that they didn't know about prior to that 5 days. So
New information came out on April 25th.
You can't just say,
Got it.
I just thought of this.
Sure.
It's too late then.
Got it. Well, that's reasonable to say, hey, we have this invention that came out that we all need, whatever it is, but you get it, right? So it's at least in the Constitution bylaws to account for things that you can't account for. I like that. Okay, so that's pretty self-explanatory. All right, Terry, on day one, before 5 o'clock at some point, there'll be nominations of officers. Now, they're not going to be elections on that day, but this is when everybody kind of gets nominated for all those positions. Right. Walk us through that. Give us the overview of how that happens.
It's basically if you want to be a candidate for any of the offices, somebody has to nominate you. So normally you find somebody to do that. That person will go to the mic and say, I nominate Matt Sahr for president.
Do you think anybody can do that this year?
Yeah.
You think they'll do it? Do you get an automatic nomination by being the president?
No,
or does somebody actually have to nominate
Somebody
you?
has to do it. You're
Everybody
starting
has
all
to
over.
nominate. Yeah. So the nomination process is
We should all trick you and I'll wait 40 seconds before anybody says your name.
generally people are going to be talking about it beforehand.
Yeah.
And then they come and the nomination process is usually fairly quick.
Yeah. So nominations, everybody gets nominated, and then there's going to be some speakers there throughout the day. They kind of get worked in. Who you got lined up?
One of them that's really been a great friend to us for a long time is Curtis Hertel. He's a former state senator. He also worked in the governor's office for a long time. He helped us with budget last time around. He's also running for Congress. He is a real good friend to us. He's already been endorsed by the International and the MPFFU, and we're hoping to get him into Congress because we know he's going to continue to fight for labor rights. And, again, a huge supporter of firefighters and the job that we do.
Absolutely. Anybody else coming?
We have a few other ones. We did invite the speaker tape, but it's all about scheduling.
Yeah.
So we're unsure if he's going to be able to make it. Obviously have open invite to our general president and secretary treasurer. If they're able to make it, we're not exactly sure. Again, that is a crazy job.
Get him in the podcast again.
But we do know that DVP Sanders will be there.
Cool.
So it's always good to have him to take 2 to 3 days out of his time to be there with us is a big deal, and we greatly appreciate that. We also invited Angela Whitwer, who's our appropriations chair. She does great for us. We're not sure if she's going to be able to make it as well because of scheduling, and they are in session during that time. Our convention is when they are scheduled to meet. So, but we also have our lobbyist, Melissa McKinley, who does a great job. So she's always a good resource to have there as well. We will have some other guests as well.
You never know who might show up. Like you said, scheduling, but somebody might drop in after.
That's correct.
And it is an election year. You never know who's going to show up.
Yeah.
Yeah, the agenda is another one of those things that people take for granted. They don't realize how much behind-the-scenes juggling there are to fit people's schedules into the agenda. So,
right. If you thought three kids' soccer schedules were tough, try wrangling politicians.
Yeah. And so we do have to do a lot of things on the fly as far as we're going to stop now on resolutions and let this person speak.
Yeah. Sure.
Fortunately, for the last several conventions, that's been done rather seamlessly.
Yeah, it's been great. Yeah.
So
I like how that's done, though. Okay, cool. Let's break it up for a minute. You kind of listen, see what they got to say.
I mean, quite frankly, when you're having these politicians or friends or people from the international, they're coming in from all over the country. And Traverse City isn't exactly Metro Detroit. So it's gorgeous lake community. They're flying in, and it's not, the easiest place to get to. So they're in and out. They have a limited time frame. So we try to be accommodating to them, because they're showing the respect for our organization being there.
Absolutely. And it's easy to accommodate for people that, they actually got some stuff to say, and they're friends of us.
Yes.
Friends of ours.
Yes.
And once they got that mic in front of them, it's pretty hard to say, okay, that's enough.
Yeah.
So you're never really sure how long they're going to speak.
Right.
You talk about it ahead of time, but once they start talking, it could really throw the whole agenda into a monkey wrench there. So.
Yeah. If you saw our last podcast, even firemen do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So day 2 is May 1st. And then essentially what we're doing is cleaning up the rest of the business that is the carryover from day 1. That's kind of the primary objective of day 2.
Yep.
So if there is nothing else, and after we get through that, then we vote on all those people that got nominated on day one, right, Terry?
Yes.
And so that process, literally there's ballots, the delegates are the voting people if there's an alternate, and then there's that credentialing committee and the election committee that working interchangeably to make sure that that is upheld and done the way that it should be, who's voting, how many counts, all that. Anything else you want to talk about on the elections part of that, Terry?
Well, the other thing that we vote on is where the 2026 convention is going to be. There's 5 locals that are bidding on it. We've got East Lansing, Bay City, Novi, Muskegon, and Port Huron. All be making presentations. Some of them will be here on site for a couple of days to try to pitch their hotel. That's one of the items that are on the ballot. So we will have an election, even if there aren't any candidate elections. We'll still vote for the 2026 convention location.
Yes.
Oh, that's cool. I like that the members get an opportunity to be the ones to say where they're going to have their convention. And again, it's the delegates voting on that as well.
Yes.
It's not just so it's those same people that vote for the officers and the resolutions are the same people that vote on the location of the next one.
Yes.
Correct.
Copy. So that's cool that they get to, bid for the vote, and that community gets to win with a bunch of us showing up, most guys with their mustaches and their hats.
Yes.
All right. All right. So elections take place that day. Speakers get worked in, clean up the rest of the business, and by the end of that day, we have resolutions voted, yay or nay on every one of them. Our Constitution and bylaws may have changed. We're spending money maybe a little bit different way. We've had all these conversations, and we got a plan for the next 2 years to get us even further than we currently are, and that's the idea. And then the people that got voted in carry out that plan.
Yeah.
And then we do these meetings every quarter, and the locals meet as much as they do, and we keep feeding into the system and hopefully keep making gains along the way. We miss anything?
No, I think we covered it all.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys very much. I look forward to this, and go team.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Jeff.
See you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you to Matt Sahr and Terry Chesney for coming on the show to discuss the 2024 MPFFU Convention, which will take place on April 29 through May 1st, 2024. Please email us your feedback and tell us what you think about the show, or send us ideas for future episodes to mpffupodcast@gmail.com. Follow the MPFFU's Instagram account at m.p.f.f.u. And finally, please subscribe, like, and share all of our content on the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union YouTube channel. Thank you. Have a great day.